All right, all right. Well, welcome back. If you are found along in the playbook, the client communication playbook, we're in chapter 4. If you are in the client communication master class series dashboard, you're following along and you have the information and the PDFs and all that kind of stuff. You're watching on YouTube. I'll put the link to the freebie that you'll need in the comments, and I'll put the link to the playbook because if you haven't purchased the playbook yet, you should go and do that. And welcome. Uh, this this video is all about the realization and the solution. So the realization is there is going to come a day in your professional career when you realize that the way that you speak, the way that you communicate is different than someone 10 years younger than you and is different than someone 20 years older than you. And you think differently. You've seen the world differently. You have different backgrounds. You absorb content differently. And that's why way back at the beginning of all this, we learned our voice, our primary voice. We learned our secondary voice. We learned our growth voice. So now we're going to bring that in a little bit. And so at one point, you'll get to this realization, and then we got to talk about the solution. But this all came about because one day I'm having coffee with a wholesaler. His name is Dan Cianci. And I thought we were meeting about maybe some public speaking coaching or some other type of coaching. And he presented this idea that he spends a lot of time in financial centers and he sees the breakdown in the different generations trying to communicate. The tellers who are mostly Gen Z or maybe millennials or sometimes Gen X, have to deal with younger generations, or, millennials have to talk with boomers, or Gen X has to talk with Gen Z. And everything just comes to a head because there's a generational misalignment. And sometimes in our conversations, we don't even know that there's a misalignment because we're just communicating the way that we think we should communicate. And that's just not how it works all the time. And so this chapter in the playbook is a little bit differently because it's primarily charts. It's primarily charts. And if you're a manager in the store, speakofpeople.com/store, there is in the bundle training, there are some exercises that you can get that open this up more. So if you do a huddle training with your team, you'll have more huddles. But the first thing you really got to do, especially as you start diving into this, is you've got to think through, okay, what is your own generation? So let's go through this for a second. The silent generation is 1928 to 1945. Okay. Baby boomers, 46 to 64. Gen X, 65 to 80. Millennials, 81 to 96. And Gen Z, 97 to 2012. And I got to tell you, friends, you've got to be on the lookout because the next generation, some are calling a generation alpha, that are coming up are going to be the largest generation yet. And they're going to be the most digitally connected and digitally advanced generation this world has ever seen. Gen Z itself has practically grown up on the internet, but this next generation, they are pure digital natives. So it's an amazing thing. So make sure you know which generation you fall into, and then start to do a guesstimate on the amount of percentage generations that you have under each of your clients. Is 50% of them boomers? Is another 25% Gen X? That's for you to figure out. But a couple of things just to kind of kick us off. Silent generation, they value tradition and respect. It's just how they operate. Boomers value loyalty, professionalism. They still appreciate a sir and a ma'am. Gen X values efficiency, independence. Makes sense. We were the first generations to go to Latchkey, which was an after school kind of care thing. Millennials value transparency and purpose. And Gen Z values authenticity and speed. So get ready because they love speed. They love speed. Here's the other thing about each generation. Boomers, their primary channel of communication, they love to talk on the phone. They love to talk in person. And They love that. Gen X, they love email. Getting on the phone is great for Gen X. Millennials is as much digital as possible. You'll see a lot of millennials sending video messages, audio messages. Gen Z loves DM, loves text. And so these are the things that, are so incredibly important. And if you're going through the playbook, there's an exercise in this chapter where you can actually take your voice style, vision, organization, insight, clarity, or empathy, and you can combine it with each of these. And so there's a great exercise that you should be able to do. But what I want to do now is I want to bring up kind of the mega cheat sheet. When you look at each of these generations, and there's, a mega cheat sheet here so you can understand. And if you're a manager and you're going through this, the reality is that this could help you, especially in huddles or when you're doing training events, so you can ask your team, what's the best way to communicate with a boomer? What are some of the things? So let's just kind of go through these. For the boomers, like we've talked about, they love experience, they love loyalty, they love professionalism. They're going to love to be in person. They're going to love structured conversations. So the last chapter is very, very important. You're coming in with a plan. Things to avoid with boomers: an overly casual tone, too much jargon, skipping the details, uh, the language that lands with boomers. Here's the game plan. And let's walk through the options. I want to honor your time. They love that kind of stuff. And so that's all incredibly important. All right. So Gen X, again, they love efficiency, independence, expertise. They're going to love email or direct conversation. They're going to love, a brief phone call. They're going to love, maybe some video messages if you're allowed to send that. For Gen X, avoid overselling, micromanaging, and fluff. And then some language that lands. Here's the short version. Let me give you the straight facts. You could take it or leave it. I mean, there's some things like that. So, that will really help with Gen X. Then we go on to the millennials, and they love transparency. For whatever reason, millennials are the most tattooed generation, believe it or not. They love purpose and flexibility. They love to text, email. They love digital tools. They're going to send audio messages back and forth, video messages. Something to avoid when you're talking to millennials: do not talk at them. Do not talk at them. That whole list of speaking at that we went over, don't do any of that with millennials. And then some language that lands. Here's why this matters. This aligns with your goals. I want to hear your input. Very important to say those kind of things. Then we get to Gen Z, different generation. They love authenticity. They love speed. They love visual communication. My 21-year-old son, if I don't text him within seconds of him texting me, he's sending follow-up texts. They love instant. So DM style, fast-paced, digital. They don't like over-explaining or slow follow-up or stiff language. So some great phrases like "let's break it down" or "your future self will thank you." Real talk. So here's where it gets kind of fun, because uh, you can actually learn how to use your voice style with each generation. And so, say that your main primary style is vision. And so, for boomers, inspire through legacy and impact, and avoid hype or overpromising. For Gen X, show long term results in leadership, avoid lofty talk with substance. For millennials, aligned vision to purpose and flexibility, and avoid making it all about you, which you shouldn't do anyways. We'll talk more about that in the story catching chapter. And then Gen Z, paint a future that feels relevant and real. Avoid sounding fake or idealistic. That's gold for you vision. Now you organize, provide structure, timelines, follow through, and definitely avoid being overly rigid. Make sure you offer systems, options, stay in control. Avoid the red tape or the bureaucracy. Gen X, not super fan of that. Organize. Millennials use digital planning tools, give autonomy, avoid overwhelming with too much structure. And then keep it short, interactive, easy to access. Avoid long checklists or bulky PDFs. They're just not into it. Okay, those of you with the insight voice, honor their wisdom while offering a new perspective. Avoid reteaching them. Invite them into a strategy conversations. Avoid sounding theoretical. Ask deep, thoughtful, why questions. Avoid going too philosophical or vague. And then make insights fast, visual, tied to action. Avoid anything that feels like a lecture. So important. Now we move on to clarity folks. I wonder how many clarity folks there are. Walk through them step by step with respect. Avoid dumbing it down. Then for the Gen Xers, for clarity, you got to get to the point fast. Avoid oversimplifying, over explaining. And then the millennials, summarize and repeat with purpose. Avoid burying the idea. And then use clean visuals, short phrases. Avoid walls of text or stiff tone for the Gen Z. And then for empathy, okay? Remember, your words are like a hug. For boomers, listen and affirm their experience and concerns. Avoid overpersonalizing. For Gen X, acknowledge tension without dwelling on it. Avoid emotion without direction. Millennials, lead with care and connection. Avoid robotic and scripted. And then Gen Z, be real, relaxed, human. Avoid being too formal or emotionally distant. These are some powerful exercises that you're able to go through together. And that's why these charts exist. And I know that they're not the most fun or the most sexy things, but in your preparation to becoming not just average, not just above average, but an exceptional client communicator. Because remember, why? Because average communication is costing you trust, influence, referrals, business. And so an exceptional communicator is a financial professional who's both wealth expert and people expert in your journey to become this expert and to serve your clients so incredibly well. It's so important to understand how you communicate and to recognize how they communicate. So, in the playbook chapter, make sure before you move on, you do the questions, review some of them, go through them, and then go through the wrap up. Go through the wrap up together because the reality is you need to understand how to sit down with someone 2 generations older than you. You need to sit down with somebody 2 generations younger than you. And you need to be able to speak to them in a way that your voice matches and they understand. And that's absolutely possible with this incredible information. Don't forget, sign up for Insights, the client growth, referral and retention report newsletter. This is an opportunity for you every other week to get a new email with different ideas and stuff. This is not our free communication guide email. Because this is a subscription, you are getting the best of the best. And so I can't wait. Like always, you have my email. Email me right now, jason@speakwithpeople.com. Let me know what's the easiest generation for you to communicate with and what's the most difficult. You got my phone number. And if we're not connected on LinkedIn, come on, let's get connected. Let's be a part. I cannot wait for the next segment, the next module, the next section, whatever we're calling them, whether you're on YouTube, whether you're in the Client Communication Masterclass dashboard, you're doing this as an individual or a team. All right, can't wait for the next one. We'll talk to you soon.